Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to talk about kind of my predictions on what the future is going to look like for the box office. And really, it's going to be an interesting next couple of months just to see what films do. But we do have some early signs right now with Christopher Nolan's Tenet, which opened in 40 countries. Um, Internationally. It hasn't released in the United States and also has not released in China or I think any of the other major Asian markets. But based on what people were thinking was going to be the initial drop and what the actual money that was made was, um, this is actually looking kind of interesting. It's looking a little better than maybe what people thought. Now, we're gonna have to wait for the domestic numbers from the United States. We're also gonna have to wait from the numbers probably from most of the Asian markets as well, because Japan, Taiwan, Indonesia, the Philippines, those are all somewhat big markets. Um, but really, they're also curious. I mean, I'm sure Disney's curious more or less about the China money as well. Um, to see if that's anywhere near what they're expecting. So there's a lot kind of riding on this, and there's a lot of studios that are looking at Tenet right now to see what it does, so that they can make decisions on their various tentpole properties for right now. And the other thing you have to remember too is most of the countries where it's been released, they have some sort of social distancing laws in place. So in a lot of these places, you're not getting a full theater load of people. And it's going to be the same thing for the United States and the same thing for a lot of other, probably for the Chinese market as well. Um, so you're going to see that you're going to have a reduction in ticket sales because you're not going to be able to fit as many people into a theater as before, or you're going to have to expand it. And then the other problem is that you're going to run into the limit in times that you can show the film. Now, I'm not sure 100% what the running time on Tenet is. A lot of Christopher Nolan movies tend to run a little long. I'm going to guess it's probably somewhere around 3 hours. So with that, you can only show that a certain amount of times per day on so many screens per day. Now, that's the other thing that's going to boost this, though, is that a lot of movie theaters are not showing any other films, or they're only showing older films. So Tenet, when it gets released in the United States and in China next weekend, again, this is more the United States, maybe not so much China, but in the United States, most of the theaters have not been showing any kind of new films. They've just been showing old films. So Tenet is going to have complete control of probably all of the screens in most of those theaters. So it's going to be getting screened a lot more as well, because of the lack of competition. So maybe that's what's mitigating these numbers a little bit and making up for the social distancing in theaters. If you had, a regular theater season where you had a lot of blockbuster films that were in theaters around the same time, or at least a lot of different films that are going to draw different audiences, then that's where you see kind of, those tentpole films, they get a little bit of money taken away because of those movies. So maybe that's enough to add back to see a little bit of a boost. But right now, Tenet has made $54 million across the 40 countries that it premiered in, with some of the larger mostly being in Europe, the United Kingdom being the largest at 7 million, which again, that's well below the entire theatrical run that's usually for the United Kingdom, but we're probably going to have to compare those numbers at the end of the Tenet run, which is probably going to be sometime in late November. Again, depending on how popular the movie is and how long they want to leave it in theaters. Because here's the other thing too, is that looking at the numbers that Tenet is getting overseas, all of those are going to be relative individually to those countries, and there's a lot of countries that are mixed in there. Like I said, it's just been released in 40 of them. So we don't know what the different regulations are, how much money they're going to be able to get out of various theaters per showing and things like that. So really, I think the big backbreaker for this movie in the end is going to be the U.S. market. It's not going to be the Chinese, I don't think, because China money is hit or miss anyway. But as far as the U.S. domestic market goes, which theaters get more from movies they release domestically because they have to have an extra cut when they go internationally for the distributors. So they make more money domestically, which is why you see a lot of movies that have a domestic that's a lot higher than the world, or in some cases they can be equal, or the world can also be larger too in some cases. But a lot of very big American tentpole films, the domestic gross usually is close to or outdoes the international gross in some cases. So you can say, well, again, that's kind of subjective actually nowadays because of the expanding global market. But back like 10, 15 years ago, that was definitely the case. Um, but with Tenet, so we're going to see the first one of those try and go out. Basically, Tenet's kind of the guinea pig almost for all of this, where they're not 100% sure what it's going to do. But like I said, I think the U.S. market is going to be where you're going to see that movie be made or broken. And ultimately, I think that Warner Brothers is probably going to take a loss on this anyway. And I'm not actually 100% sure why they're pushing for this release date right now when they could probably release this a couple months from now and let another movie take the hit. But could be Chris Nolan. I know that he wanted to keep the original release date, which I think was in mid-July originally before it got moved the first time. But Chris Nolan, I know, wanted to keep the original date. He might have some control over that, which might be why this film is coming out. But the other thing is that Tenet's going to be a film, if it's very good, which I think it probably will be. I do like Nolan's work. Is this could be a film that could be remembered in the sense of, this could become an all-time classic just because of the circumstances surrounding its release. In the sense that this is kind of the first big blockbuster movie that got released after or during the coronavirus pandemic. So this is kind of the new wave of what we can, foresee for the future. Now, like I said before, this movie is going to have a very, very steep production value in terms of, how much money do you need to make on this thing before you can, get back on your investment. There were some people that I think were originally speculating something around the 400 to 500 million mark when the budget was originally adjusted a little bit lower. I think now the high estimates are like it has to get something around 750 to 800 million to become profitable, which I think is probably roughly what it should be, given the fact that Nolan also used all practical effects in this film, and I don't think virtually almost no CGI was used, which is kind of a hallmark of him. He really does like to go with practicals, and I do appreciate that. But like I said, it's going to be an interesting situation. I think that the films that follow this are going to know really maybe what they should do when they're opening a film, where you should open first, how you should go about this, whether you have a staggered release, whether you have a global release, what's the best way to make money in this type of a situation in terms of releasing the film, and in what markets and how many showings and how many screens and how big of a cut should the cinemas get, all that sort of stuff. They're going to be able to gauge Tenet and they're going to be able to get a better idea. So I think you're going to see increasing box office numbers leading into September, October, and November. And then you'll probably see a little bit of a peak also in December because I think there's still a few films that are set to come out then. But then you're going to see the drop off from the January to February time period where it's mostly just, crappy films and horror movies. So, you move through that, and then eventually when you get into March, then you'll start hitting other movie dates where you're going to see major films getting released, and it's going to be a packed blockbuster season. So that's really good where I think you're going to see a lot of the direct results of what we're seeing now. To see, is the rebound possible? Because again, if you release these films in succession and they could progressively gain money, which I think they will, you have a good situation on your hands. You're getting more and more money back. Eventually, you'll get back to normalcy. With the opposite of that, if it plateaus or if it gets lower, if the box office continues to drop instead or just completely stay the same, then you have a problem because then you're going to have to start trying to bolster the box office by releasing some more major films. Otherwise, it's not going to be as lucrative for the theaters to actually show them instead of just showing, a select few from certain studios that they know is going to make a certain amount of money. So it's going to be an interesting scenario. I think they're going to be all right. I think you're going to see an increase in money over time. But again, the studios can take the hits for now. They have a lot of movies in the pipeline, and their streaming services again are going through the roof now because of this whole coronavirus thing. So, I mean, they're making money in different ways, even though they are losing a lot of it in others. Except for Disney, they're losing stuff on all parts because of the park services and stuff. But that's just kind of my opinion on what I think the box office is looking like and maybe what Tenet can tell us about what the box office will look like in the future. But I want to know what you think. Do you think Tenet is going to make a good amount at the box office despite the despite the limitations that are being put on it by coronavirus and just the people not wanting to go out and be in public places because of that, or do you think that it's going to wind up doing fine and it'll succeed, and then we'll have more and more success in the future as we keep building up, to getting back to normalcy. Like I said, I want to know what you think. Put your thoughts in the comments below. As usual, I like to read them. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?